And so I'd like to welcome you to Unity Spiritual Center, and also a shout out to our online community. So glad you're with us today. And I'm grateful that you've been brave enough to come into a discussion or lecture on forgiveness. Some people shy away from the topic of forgiveness because it can be sometimes hard work. But here we are in the start of 2018, and as we move forward to create our life anew in this new year, we have the opportunity to take a crucial first step in creating the life and the experience and the environment that we want for ourselves, that is pushed to our attention through the still small voice of the divine within. That crucial first step in creating that life that we so desire is to practice forgiveness. Specifically, forgiveness of ourself and forgiveness of others. Sometimes we forgive others and we forget to forgive ourselves. It's a twofold activity. So unforgiveness is that conscious and subconscious energy block that stops us in our path, that derails us on our trajectory, on our life's paths. And it doesn't matter how positive we may appear in the outer, when we are holding the slightest grudge, judgment, and wounded thought, we are stopping ourselves from vibrating in the way that will allow us our highest and best good to manifest in our life experience. And so to fully begin anew, we must forgive ourselves and others. We must make amends. New Thought Unity consultant, Reverend Martha Creek, says, in unity, they speak in the positive and the affirmative. I am good, I am perfect, I am whole, I am complete, I am a child of God. I am the love. I know you all do that. You practice in the mirror. But she goes on to say, that is all true in the absolute, in the divine realm. However, back here on the ranch, I'm a blamer, I'm an accuser, I'm a nitpicker, I'm a whiner, and I'm a manipulator, and I'm damn good at it all. That Martha, she's a hoot. You should see her in person. Right, Ron? I don't give her justice. She also shares being a New Thought consultant. She works with more than just the Unity movement. She works with religious science and science for spiritual living and other independence. And she isolated Unity out and has said it has not served them as individuals. It has not served the Unity movement to attempt to deny the full spectrum of being a human being. And I absolutely agree with her. Our Unity teachings focus on Unity Principle 2, identifying and awakening and quickening the divine spirit in us so that we can move into an awareness of God active in our lives. But you know, the other 50% of us is absolutely human. And when we don't address the needs, the wants, the desires, the teachings of what it is to be fully human in the world, we just allow for dysfunction to continue. When we are not absolutely honest about how that dysfunction manifests in our lives and in our circles of influence and in our communities, we are not doing ourselves the highest and best. We need to be fully honest about the human condition and the challenges the humanness of us face. I like to think about how perfect I am, and oh, it's divine and spiritual and oh, lovely. And yet, when I wake up in the morning, it can be sometimes challenging because I know myself to be a human being. You can ask Rob if you don't believe me. He will not hold back in sharing how human I can be. And so we need to be fully honest about embracing the spirit and the human within. We need to be fully honest about the human condition. We need to learn to manage the human dysfunction and set limits and create boundaries, to respect the boundaries that we need to love and be safe in the world. And we need to be okay with standing in our truth, that there's a boundary there for my experience. And when people cross over that invisible boundary line, we have the ability to lovingly say, I don't appreciate that. And there's nothing wrong or terrible about doing so. You are standing in your personal power. And so as we surround ourselves in a spiritual community of individuals who are working to learn to stand in their personal power in a loving and gentle way, we know we are supported in our human growth as we step from the human into expressing our Christ self in a greater way. So as human beings, life can get a little messy. It is our attempt to balance the human and the spiritual within that can sometimes create a little chaos. In our attempt to live from the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health and well-being, we sometimes must leave the past. The people of the past, the experiences of the past, the places of the past. We leave them in the past. And so in taking a stand for our mental, emotional, physical, spiritual growth and evolution, which is why you're here, we collectively support one another to move beyond the past, to leave what was and move forward. Hence, our mission to inspire and empower personal transformation. That's what we do. Last Sunday, during our Whitestone ceremony, we, the participants of this community, took a stand. Because in making a choice to come in those doors, now newcomers, this may not apply to you, but I think it does. By coming in those doors, you made a conscious choice to be a part of something greater. You have chosen to walk your talk. And so collectively, last week, we took a stand and affirmed this together. I'm going to invite us to do it again. Ready? I am here to grow spiritually. I can step into my highest expression more effectively with you by my side to help me grow in my personal transformation. Whoops. Oops. I'm all tech now, and so, something unusual is happening. Oh, there it is. I give you, my fellow truth student, permission to lovingly tell me when my thoughts, words, and deeds are less than what my highest expression of a divine spiritual being would express in the world. People have asked me for copies of that, so if you're one of them, just send an email. And so as we collectively move forward, inspired and empowered to stand in our personal power and our spiritual truth, it is important to identify and really look at the human experience, which is why I just loved that Martha would say, in the absolute, yes, you are a perfect child of God. We tell our children that every week. But then, back here on the ranch, oh my goodness. Many of you have raised children, you know how they are. Many of you have been in relationships, you know how that other is. They're blamers and accusers and nitpickers, whiners. Oh, and worse. Amen to that, Michael. So it is our humanness that gets us in the sticky situation, not our spiritual nature. We talk all the time about our spiritual nature, but we must also give 50% of our time and energy to growing and evolving the humanness within. We are so quick to blame. It's his fault. He did it. Someone else. We are quick to blame and judge another. We all know about this, right? Pointing at someone else. There's 3 fingers pointing back at you because you're worse than them. That annoyance that they do, it annoys us because we do it ourselves. We're annoyed at ourselves more than the other person, hence the 3 fingers. It's not 2 and 2, it's 3 and 1. It's worse than you thought. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, says that forgiveness is the process of giving up the false for the true. We give up the false idea that we are bigger and better than anybody else. We give up the false idea that we are less than anybody else. Our humanness, our ego, plays tricks on our mind to keep us small in some way. Because it is really our divine self that is our highest and best self. That's why we like to claim it so much. That human self, it can be a little troublesome. So it is the human mind, the ego mind, where there is error, thinking, and judgment, wrongdoing, and downright stupidity. Wouldn't you say? There's a lot of laughter going on out there. It may sound judgmental, but our goal in having this dialogue or lecture is to bring ourselves back into balance. Balance the spiritual with the human. So how do we do that? Well, we think of it like 2 teams. It's sports season. I know I get told when there's an after-service meeting when there's playoffs and such. So I put it into a perspective that you all would understand. 2 teams. The red team is your humanness, family troubles, worry, anger, judgment, anxiousness, the unknown. The blue team is the divine, connection with spirit, love of self, love of others, joy, bliss. Life is good. So in the New Thought philosophy, where consciousness or the mind is the playing field, and the players are the thoughts we think, Each of us has that human mind team going on, playing games in our head. Do we not? It is the human thoughts that convince us that we are separate from others. In the human mind is where we hold the thoughts of error and judgment, which creates separation. Separation from one another and separation from the indwelling divine presence. Now let me ask you this. If it's the indwelling divine presence, can you ever be separate? This is a yes or no question. Oh, just checking. All of a sudden I became a need to know kind of gal. So when we separate ourselves from the blue team, the divine mind, that is where there is principle, working, and universal law, and a feeling of oneness. We experience the still small voice in prayer and meditation. We know God to be present and active in our lives. It's bliss and nirvana when we play on the blue team. The challenge is both of those teams are going on in our heads all the time. That's what makes the human experience so exciting. At any given moment, you get to choose. Are you playing on the red team or are you playing on the blue team? Wait till I get to the strategy. No, I'm just kidding. Charles Fillmore says that man can do everything with the thoughts of his mind. They are absolutely under his control. He can direct them, he can coerce them, he can hush them, he can crush them. He can dissolve one thought and put another in its place. There is no place in the universe where man has complete mastery other than his own mind. If you have in mind that someone has wronged you, you cannot let in the cleansing power of spirit until you have dissolved and cast out the belief of the wrong. That was all Charles Fillmore. We call this, when we talk about universal laws, the law of dissolving. We are dissolving an idea or mindset or thought that is holding us in a place of unforgiveness. Ernest Holmes says that from selfish reasons alone, if from no loftier reason, we cannot afford to find fault, to hate, or even hold in mind anything against another living soul. Do it for a selfish reason. Go ahead, he's giving you permission. Do it for yourself. Forgive another that you're holding a grudge for. Do it for yourself. When we clear the playing field of the mind of all error, thinking, judgment, wrongdoing, and our own stupidity, forgiveness is the freedom of our own mind and heart and our energy. This freedom from the chains of these thoughts allows us to move on. This freedom from others hurting, that we believe they have hurt us, or that we believe we may have hurt them. We must cut the chain. Did you know that the number one reason for conflict, not just between 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people, but between countries, can be narrowed down to one concept? It is the feeling that we have been disrespected in some way. Now, the funny thing about that is, when you apply psychology to that, the feeling of being disrespected comes from within. It's your feeling that made that thought happen. Usually that feeling is created because of poor communication, or inaccurate communication, or incomplete communication. Last February, the month of love, we talked about crucial conversations. We're coming into the month of love next month. Maybe a good time to review crucial conversations, because it is our own self-esteem or lack thereof that allows us to have a feeling of being disrespected. When we respect ourselves, when we know who we are and what is of value to us, we can stand in our personal power. We can combine our human and our divine into the one and only that each of us are on the planet. And so, forgive yourself for not having a strong enough self-esteem to not feel disrespected if that has happened to you at some point in your life. And I'm sure it has. It's part of the human experience. It's how we inspire and grow and move on. So love yourself on the way to becoming an equally balanced individual, combining the human and the beauty, the good, bad, and the ugly of the human, and the good of the divine. It's a moment-to-moment process. And so I invite you to walk with your highest self as you go through this week's journey on the path. Namaste.